Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around it is a review of the 2019 comic book film Joker. Now, Joker is one of those films that I've been aware of for a while. When it was announced, I think I even talked about it in other videos. It's a film that I've seen the trailer for, but the trailer didn't really wow me. It didn't really make me want to run out and jump and see the movie like it did for other people. And I guess I was just very leery and on the fence about a Joker film because I felt that without Batman, it was questionable to me that the Joker would be able to thrive and would be able to succeed on his own, with him being the sole focus of a narrative. So that was something that really turned me off when it comes to this movie. There were also a lot of other films that I was more interested in, that I was more passionate about, and those films ultimately were on my watch list above Joker. But I was able to pick up Joker on 4K for pretty cheap, and I finally decided to sit down and watch it because I've been in the mood to check out some films from the past couple years that have been praised or have gotten a lot of acclaim in one way or another, but I just hadn't gotten around to seeing yet. And Joker was one of them, so I decided, why not? Let's check it out. And I was pleasantly surprised by how much I actually liked the movie. I don't think Joker's a masterpiece. I don't think it's a great film, mainly due to how the narrative and the way things unfold is a little bit too cliched, a little bit too one note for me. And it also suffers from some incredibly slow pacing early on. But despite the issues I do have with the film that I feel prevent it from being truly great, I still think it's a really good film, and I can see why a lot of people really enjoyed this and thought it was a great movie, or they thought that it was one of their favorite films from 2019. This is easily one of the best films based on a DC comic character that has been released in a long, long time. And I think a big part of it is everyone involved with this film is taking things not only seriously, but they are putting their all into it. They aren't half-assing anything, and they're also not afraid to take risks and to go places that very few DC films have went. The R rating and the hardcore, gritty Scorsese, Taxi Driver, 70s kind of violence, that is something that you haven't seen on screen in a while, especially with a big film like this released by a major studio, and especially not a comic book movie. So that's honestly very refreshing to see a comic book film that is in the vein of something like Taxi Driver. And unlike some other critics, I don't think this is just a ripoff of Taxi Driver. I think this stands on its own well enough. Yes, there are elements that are clear homages to Taxi Driver or King of Comedy, but I don't think this is just some lazy ripoff of either of those movies. The film was directed by Todd Phillips, and I thought he did a terrific job directing this movie. I was really shocked by how great his direction was, how well he captured the grit and the grime of the early 80s, and just how he handled everything. from a guy who really was known more for his comedies. This is the guy who directed the Hangover trilogy. And that's another reason why I was leery about this movie is with Todd Phillips as a director, I wasn't really that sure when it comes to him being able to handle this kind of film. And he proved me wrong and then some. Like Todd Phillips, he was terrific. He did an amazing job directing this movie. Controlling Joaquin Phoenix, which had to be a chore because Joaquin's known for being a method actor, and I bet that there were a lot of days on the set that were really chaotic because of the fact that he's such a method actor. And Todd managed to manage all of those things well and figure things out enough that he didn't lose control of the film. And he also got some great performances, not only from Phoenix, but from everyone else in the cast. And it's just a really well shot film. It, at many times, really does look like something that could have been from the 70s or the early 80s. And I believe that was 100% intentional on his part. There's not a lot of camera moves or takes or edits or things like that where the camera moves in a way that wasn't very common for then. I can see why some people might find it to be a little static, but I didn't really see it that way at all. It didn't really have to be that fancy. This kind of film didn't need a lot of fancy camera tricks. And I think it actually benefited a lot from familiarity and a focus when it comes to the direction. I feel that Todd decided instead of using fancy camera tricks and stuff like that to really make the film stand out, he decided to use the setting of Gotham City, which is very reminiscent of 70s New York. And also the intensity and the overall emotion of the film and the story that the screenwriters were trying to tell. And speaking of the script, it's a pretty solid screenplay by Todd Phillips and Scott Silver. I think where they really nail it is when it comes to expressing the anger and the angst when it comes to the downtrodden members of society, the mentally ill, the poor, the disadvantaged. I really feel the screenplay does a remarkable job bringing their strife to the forefront. Even though Arthur is a psychopath, you still do sympathize with him in some way or another. And I feel that that was something that really blew me away when it comes to the screenplay. That it did manage to actually make me sympathetic towards Arthur. Not to the point where I feel his actions were justified in the end, but I still felt for him considering what he was dealt in terms of the hand that he was born with. You know, he was born with a bad hand, and I feel that that is something that I guess in some ways I can relate to, having history with mental illness in my family. So seeing someone like Arthur lose their aid, lose their help, and just become further and further isolated from the rest of society, and then mocked, and then beaten, and broken down physically and mentally and emotionally to the point where he just cracks. There is a lot of tragedy to that. And it makes you wonder whether or not this whole scenario or ultimately what Arthur winds up doing on the Murray Franklin show could have been avoided if society wasn't so fucking shitty sometimes. If society treated people like Arthur with more appreciation and respect and gave them the help that they need. So I feel, yeah, the film managed to really do a great job pointing that out. And it also tapped into that carnal nature that a lot of us have when it comes to having these thoughts about retaliating against people who are treating us like trash, our bosses at work who are cutting our hours and aren't telling us anything and are just being backstabbing pieces of shit. People who insult others on the internet or on social media behind a computer and hide themselves in this veil of anonymity and think they can just get away with saying anything and there's no consequences. And I feel that when it comes to Joker, when he ultimately does lash out on the Murray Franklin show, that it does touch and it really does hit a pretty significant portion of the audience in terms of their feelings and taps into that part of us that wants revenge, that wants to go out there and tell it like it is, and be not be unafraid of speaking their mind without the fear of consequences. And yeah, it does have some really great quotes. I mean, forgive me there. Speaking of quotes, for some reason I can't talk. But it does have some really great quotes in terms of the whole speech that he has about what do you do? What do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that abandons him and treats him like trash? You get what you fucking deserve. And that's really something that, in a lot of ways, is kind of poignant because that is what happens. That can happen. You could push someone to the breaking point because of all of these factors that are completely out of their control. And factors that could have been erased or the severity of them could have been lessened if they were given help. But if you're not going to give them help, if you're not going to provide them with assistance, then sometimes they feel like the only way that they can take control of their life is through violence and is through these kind of actions and this behavior. I'm not saying it's justified, but it's understandable. And I think that's something that this film tries to do is it tries to show us the difference between justifying the acts of someone like Arthur and understanding his actions. I also like the fact that it did have a bit of a sweet love story with Arthur and his neighbor. I felt that was a nice bit of levity between Arthur and Sophie. They easily could not have had that there at all, but they decided to have that in the film in order to make Arthur seem much more human and to show that he actually does have some form of compassion for other people. And I definitely feel that helped the film in terms of its ability to not completely lose the audience. And the same goes for the scenes with his mother and him taking care of her. But despite all of these positives, which also include how they handled Bruce Wayne and Thomas Wayne. I really liked that switch. It was very different. It was unique. It was a completely different portrayal of Thomas Wayne that we haven't seen before, and I really appreciated the fact that they were showing something different when it comes to this character. He wasn't this perfect guy. He was a rich asshole, like a lot of rich people are, who say a lot of things in front of the camera, but when you get them behind closed doors or when you get face to face with them, it's a completely different story. But yeah, the script, though, has issues when it comes to how it displays Arthur's descent into madness. It's riddled with cliches and it's way too predictable. The twists and turns when it comes to what happens are just incredibly familiar, and they really are one note. And that's unfortunate. And that's a big reason why the first half of the film is so fucking slow. 30 minutes into the movie feels like an hour, and that's never a good thing. Once the film really starts to pick up in its intensity, then it starts to pick up in terms of the pacing. But it's a bit of a slog to get there. And I feel if it didn't take a standard route in terms of showing his descent into madness, then I feel that it had a better chance of being more engaging as a whole when it comes to the narrative and the storyline. Break it up a little bit. Have some flashbacks to when he was a kid or something, or play with the idea that he's an unreliable narrator more early on in the film. You just do the typical stuff where he gets beat physically and mentally and emotionally, and that causes him to snap. He gets beat up by those thugs, he loses his job, he falls for people and is used by other people. His mom gets sick and dies, and he eventually learns how to fight back, and then he really likes the power and likes the ability that he now has after the scene in the subway of control. He likes the fact that he finally has control of his life, and that becomes an awakening for him. And things just continue to spiral further and further out of control. The screenplay, when it comes to certain lines of dialogue, when it comes to certain aspects of Arthur's character and his background, and how it twists and rearranges familiar origin stories like with Thomas Wayne, is very noteworthy. But when it comes to this descent into insanity, not so much. But that's just me personally. But as solid as the script is, and as good as Todd Phillips' direction appears to be, this film would not be nearly as good as it is without Joaquin Phoenix. This is a one-man show, and Joaquin Phoenix delivered a unbelievably compelling, heart-wrenching, and genuinely chilling performance as Arthur. He deserved the Oscar, and then some, if you ask me. I can totally get it, and I understand 100% why he won the Oscar for Best Actor. Because this was a performance for the ages. It was really that good. It was a difficult role to pull off, too, because you have this character in Arthur who has this condition that makes him laugh at times where it's not really appropriate, and it's not always an expression of his feelings, and he made that believable. And he made you buy into it as if he actually had that affliction and it wasn't just an act. And that was really important to this portrayal of the character, because if that didn't work out, people would be laughing for all the wrong reasons. And it was a very risky choice to make the laughing a personal affliction that Arthur has to deal with, but the risk paid off because he had the right actor for the role who was immensely capable of pulling off such a feat. And it's just how committed he was to this. He lost all this weight and he just really lived and breathed the character of Arthur Fleck and of the Joker. The rest of the cast is good too. Robert De Niro as Murray Franklin. That was a really out of the box casting choice. Robert De Niro is not known for being the guy who you would pick to be the host of a talk show. So I feel that was a out of the box casting choice, and it also worked really well. And it was nice to see Robert De Niro in that kind of role, period. It was also nice to see Robert De Niro in a really good movie again that doesn't waste his talents with fart jokes and stupid, childish humor. And Zazie Beetz, I liked her scenes with Joaquin Phoenix. I felt that she had this vulnerability to her and this openness that was really charming in terms of how she was willing to put herself out there and be so open to somebody who was clearly not all there, like Arthur, and be willing to help him out. And you really did feel for her when she had to deal with the fact that he was just gone mentally. He's completely just shattered, and he's sitting there in her apartment, and he recreates the gun to the head thing that was actually surprisingly endearing despite how messed up it is. And this time around, it's not a joke. It's disturbingly real. Frances Conroy, who played his mother, she portrayed her role really well too, as did Brett Cullen as Thomas Wayne. Now, originally, they wanted Alec Baldwin, and he was actually cast, but he had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. Brett Cullen did a really good job too, but I would have loved to have seen Alec Baldwin as Thomas Wayne. Uh, he plays these type of characters with a lot of verve, energy, and he's one of the best actors that you can think of to play this kind of rich socialite asshole who says one thing but really uh, feels completely differently. So I that would have been really nice to see. Also to see De Niro and Baldwin and Phoenix in the same film, but it just wasn't meant to be. And Brett Cullen came in and still did a wonderful job with the role. But yeah, most of the film's running time though is delegated to Joaquin Phoenix and his character of Arthur and this fall and then rise. Because if you think about it, it's really the opposite. He never really becomes a big deal or someone that anyone notices until after he falls, after he's beaten and broken, and then he rises up against society, against Gotham, with a smile on his face. And that's what makes him famous. That's what makes him someone who is now noticed instead of someone who was invisible to the rest of society. So it's not really the rise and fall of Arthur Fleck. It's more like the fall of Arthur Fleck and the rise of the Joker. The score by Hildur, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name. I can't even do it. I'm just going to say Hildur is really quite stupendous. It's at times really understated and kind of in the background, but it always has this really disturbing and unsettling tone to it. It's the perfect kind of score for this film where it feels like shit's about to go down. You know, things are about to build and boil over to extremes. And I feel this score was really one of those scores that really amplify that kind of feeling and the overall atmosphere that the director and the writers were trying to go for with the movie. It did well when it comes to the more emotional, heartfelt moments, but really the where the score shines is in the scenes that are really incredibly intense in either the violence or the subject matter. And I love how it builds. That's really one of the things I really like about this score is how it builds into a final crescendo and how each different composition combines into one big giant composition that is very epic in its size and scope. And it doesn't overdo it either. It doesn't have that epic composition with all these different different themes that were littered throughout the film combining into one. It doesn't just throw that out there numerous times throughout the running time, completely deadening its impact. So yeah, it's a really good score. I personally don't think it's the best score of 2019. I would actually give that to Thomas Newman for 1917, but it's still easily one of the best scores from 2019, and it really did fit the film very well. As did the song choices for the soundtrack. Um, you had some Frank Sinatra songs, and you also had. I'm just trying to find the page here for the music, so I'm make sure to get the artists right and the name of the songs. So yeah, you had some Frank Sinatra songs, uh, Send in the Clowns, Slap That Bass, That's Life, Smile by Jimmy Durante. That works so well with this movie and so well with the character of Arthur Fleck. And but speaking of Send in the Clowns, that's one other thing about this movie I think is a negative. The sequence in the subway or in the train where these thugs go up to Arthur and start singing to him, start singing Send in the Clowns. That could be an instance of Arthur being an unreliable narrator. And if that's the case, then it makes sense that it's just fucking randomness and doesn't really fit into the realm of reality. And the more I think about it, that's probably what it was. So maybe it's not really an issue. I would say it's probably not an issue now that I think about it, because you really have to apply that thought process to this film. The fact that some of the scenes that occur throughout the running time aren't necessarily true. They are more the delusions of Arthur than anything else. And Todd Phillips and the writers, they deliberately wrote the film and structured it in such a way that you could interpret it numerous different ways, however you want, in terms of which aspects of the movie are delusions and which aspects are reality. But yeah, overall, really good songs that were chosen for the soundtrack, and they fit the film well. And all the other technical aspects of the film are noteworthy. They are also just as solid as the screenplay or the direction, the cinematography by Lawrence Sher, the editing by Jeff Groth. The running time of about 122 minutes is a bit too long. I don't feel this story needed to be as long as it was. There's some trimming that could have been done here and there. Like I said, the pacing really is an issue early on. But there's a lot to like about this film. Joaquin Phoenix's Oscar-worthy performances by the rest of the supporting cast, Todd Phillips' direction, the cinematography, the production and art design that did a remarkable job recreating the look and feel of the early 80s. It didn't feel like a parody of early 80s. It didn't feel like a hyper stylized version of that time period either. It actually felt and looked like a genuine time capsule of that period. And I think a lot of films that are trying to do throwbacks or trying to be a homage to that particular era or any era can take a lot of inspiration and pages from this film's book when it comes to how to do that right. But yeah, there, like I said, there's just a lot of good things about this movie. There's a lot of things that the Joker gets right, and that's no joke. But anyway, I don't know what else to say about the film, except thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.